permission denied, publickey on new servers, but only in one availability zone. The culprit wasn't your SSH keys. It was a bug in your dynamic inventory script returning an empty Ansible user. Let's break down Ansible Inventory Management, how it works, and the exact mistake behind that failure. Ansible Inventory is a collection of hosts that Ansible manages. It defines target nodes for playbooks and ad hoc commands. Inventory can be static, a file, or dynamic, generated by a script or plugin. Variables defined in inventory are merged with other sources following a strict precedence order. Static inventory files come in two formats, INI and YAML. INI is the legacy format, but YAML is now recommended for complex inventories due to better readability and nesting. INI can lead to subtle bugs like missing children suffixes. Here's a simple INI inventory. Note the all vars section for global variables, but be careful, INI format can hide errors like missing children. The same inventory in YAML. Notice how groups and children are clearly nested. YAML eliminates ambiguity and is easier to maintain. Groups are the primary way to organize hosts. A group can contain hosts, other groups, or both. Variables defined on a group apply to all hosts in that group and its children. Group hierarchy allows efficient variable assignment. Here's a multi-region inventory with nested groups. Web East 1 belongs to web servers, US East, and implicitly all. Variables defined on US East apply to all hosts in that region. Ansible automatically loads variables from host vars and group vars/directories. Files are named after the host or group. Host variables always override group variables. This is a host vars/web1 example, com YAML file. It sets HTTP port to 8080 for that specific host, overriding any group-level setting. Variable precedence within inventory is clear. Host vars overrides group vars, and among group vars, the last group alphabetically wins. But remember, playbook vars and extra vars have higher precedence. This is a group vars/all YAML file. It sets a default NTP server, but if group vars/prod, YAML also defines NTP server, it will override this value for hosts in the prod group. Dynamic inventory sources generate host lists at runtime from external systems. Ansible supports scripts and plugins. Plugins are the modern, preferred method because they are well-tested and efficient. A dynamic inventory script must output JSON with a meta key containing hostvars. This allows Ansible to get all variables in one call, improving performance. Here's an example using the OS-EC2 plugin. It fetches elastic compute cloud instances in US East 1 with tag environment equals production and sets the inventory hostname to the IP address. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. Our custom dynamic inventory script had a bug. It didn't populate Ansible user for hosts in a specific availability zone. The script output an empty string, which Ansible used, overriding the default from group vars/all. So SSH tried to connect with no username and failed. The root cause is that the dynamic inventory script returned an empty Ansible user for hosts in a specific availability zone, causing Ansible to fail with SSH key errors. The inventory script output for Ansible user in one availability zone. The fix was to update the dynamic inventory script to always include Ansible user for all hosts. We also added a CI step that runs Ansible inventory list and checks for required variables using JQ. Finally, we set a sensible default in group vars/all as a fallback. Now the script never returns an empty user. If a dynamic inventory script returns an empty string for Ansible user, Ansible uses that empty string, causing authentication to fail. Always ensure the script provides a valid user or set a default in group vars/all. Extra vars have the highest precedence. If you use E to set a variable, it overrides inventory and playbook vars. Be careful not to leave extra vars in CI pipelines, as they can silently change behavior. In INI format, if you forget the children suffix, Ansible treats the group names as host names. This silently breaks group membership. Always use production, children. Group variables are loaded in alphabetical order. If a host belongs to groups A and B and both define the same variable, B wins because it comes later. Be mindful of group names. The article mentions dynamic inventory scripts must output JSON with a meta key, but doesn't show a complete working example. Here's a minimal Python script that demonstrates the correct format, including error handling and caching. The article notes that group variables load alphabetically, but doesn't emphasize that this applies to the asterisk group name itself, not the file order. For example, group vars/z last. YAML will override group vars/a first, YAML for a host belonging to both groups. This can lead to subtle bugs if group names are not carefully chosen. The article mentions using Ansible Inventory list, but doesn't show how to filter output with JQ. This snippet demonstrates how to quickly check a specific variable across all hosts. The Ansible Inventory command is your best friend for debugging. Use list to see all hosts and groups, graph for hierarchy, and host to inspect resolved variables for a specific host. Let's run through some common interview questions. INI versus YAML. YAML for complex inventories, INI for simple flat ones. Variable precedence for host in multiple groups. Group vars/all, parent groups, child groups, alphabetical, host vars. Purpose of meta key, provides host vars in one call, avoids per host script calls. And a few frequently asked questions. Can I mix INI and YAML? Technically yes, but not recommended. How to set global default variables? Use group vars/all YAML. What if a host gets wrong variable? Check precedence and alphabetical order. Let's recap the key takeaways. Use YAML for static inventories. Organize by environment. Validate with Ansible Inventory. Host vars, group vars, last alphabetically. Ready to go deeper? Up next, Ansible variables and facts, then Ansible conditionals and loops, then Ansible handlers and notifications, and Ansible Jinya 2 templates. Find them all at TheCodeForge.io. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.